Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Sorry, we had a screen problem, but there it is. Welcome once again. We are now today looking at, we're still in Book 7 of the Politics about the Best Regime, and today we're turning to Chapter 4. So let's go right towards it, okay? Chapter 4. Now he goes, since this has been said by way of a prefix, so therefore everything was, this is, in other words, the whole discussion of the best way of life was really kind of a preface, right? The last three chapters about these things. And since other sorts of regimes were studied earlier, right? These are the, three, four, five, and six, right? Therefore, this assumes that therefore this follows this, right? Or particularly the regimes that are discussed, maybe kingship, and that as well in book 3, right? The beginning points of what remains is to speak in the first instance of the sort of presuppositions, right? The presupposition there should be concerning the city. That is to be constructed on the basis of what one would pray for. So again, this is what are the presuppositions. It's going to be on a presupposition that the city should be constituted on what we should pray for. Not, therefore, what we pray for is in the sense that what is like we would like to happen, wish to happen, pray, and this is that. Therefore, we get the best conditions. We pray for the best. We pray for the outcomes without problems, without things. So we get this. We get something that maybe is not really possible in the real world. So we would pray for, and that would be the best of that sort, right? For it is impossible for the best regime to come into being without equipment to match. So therefore, you need to have equipment. In other words, the best regime must always have without equipment to match. So that, in other words, virtue requires equipment, and hence there are many things that we should presuppose for ourselves in advance. Okay, like persons offering a prayer. Yet none of these things should be impossible. So therefore, again, it shouldn't be. What we should pray for should not be impossible. We should pray for it, but it should not be the completely impossible. It should be in the realm of reality. In other words, it should be in the realm of reality. We shouldn't dream of pie in the sky and unrealities, on floating on clouds and land, cuckoo land. No, no. What is real? In other words, we should pray. We should pray for not what is impossible or unreal, but rather we should pray for that things that are possible, that are able to be, right? I mean, for example, concerning the number of citizens and the amount of territory, right? In other words, for just as in the case of other craftsmen, the weaver, for example, or the shipbuilder, material must be available that is suitable to work on. For to the extent that this has been better prepared, what is brought into being by art is necessary, more beautiful, finer. So too in the case of political expert and the legislator. The proper material should be available in a suitable condition. So, in other words, the material and people and the material that the things that are going to be compose the city must be available, and the condition must be fine. Okay. To the equipment proper to a city belongs, in the first instance, both the multitude of human beings, how many should be available, and what quality by nature. So how many and their quality, right? How many should be available and quality, and the territory in the same way. So therefore, not only the people, right? This is that thing. The people, their number and their quality, qualitative and quantitative, right? The aspect of them, but also the territory, right? And the same question, how much, right? Same question, how much should there be, and what of quality? What is the quality of it? So therefore, the people and the land, the people and the territory, the people and the territory are interconnected in this sense, right? How many and what quality? Again, how much land and what quality? How most okay. Now, most persons suppose that it is appropriate for the happy city to be great. Okay, in other words, most people suppose that it is appropriate for the happy city, the happy city, to be great. If this is true, they are ignorant of what sort of city is great and what sort is small. Okay, so what is the great and what is the city? They think a great city should be happy, happy city should be great. He goes, no, no, no. What is great and what is happy? They're ignorant of this. They judge one to be great on the basis of number of the inhabitants, but one should not look to their number, but to their capacity. In other words, not their capacity, their ability to do things. Their ability to do things. You have a lot of people, but able to do nothing. They don't have good character. Their character is what you know. So therefore, it shouldn't be concerned about greatness. Should be not tied to number, size, but rather what the capacity, the ability to do things, their action, their ability to do things. They For there exists a certain function of a city too, right? So that the city most capable of bringing this to completion is the one that must be supposed to be the greatest. Just as one assert that Hippocrates is greater not as a human being but as a doctor than anyone excelling him in body size. In other words, here's Hippocrates, right? He is someone bigger than him, so that person must be greater than him. But no, Hippocrates, the great doctor, is the better doctor. This person might be bigger than him, but he's not as good of a doctor, right? I met Hippocrates, an example of this. So the same thing with a city. A city must be able to accomplish something. A city is designed and structure that can achieve its goal is one better that is bigger and that cannot achieve its goal, right? Yet, even if one should judge by looking into number, this must not be done on the basis of any chance multitude. For perhaps of necessity, there is, okay, we shouldn't just look for any number, any chance multitude. For perhaps of necessity, there is present in cities a large number of slaves, as well as alien and foreigners, but only those who are part of the city, of those proper parts out of which a city is constituted. Okay? So, in other words, not just slaves, aliens, foreigners, but the people who constitute the multitude that really is, that we shouldn't concern a larger multitude, but rather the proper multitude that constitutes the city, that constitutes it, that is. And there can be no city without the multitude. Okay. Um, Again, we get back to the parts of the famous discussion of parts of the city that Aristotle talked about in Book 4, Chapter 4, right? The first part, and elsewhere, right? So therefore, we think about the parts of the city, the thing that constitutes it. Um, um, in other words, what are the proper parts? Those proper parts of which a city is constituted. It is preeminent. It is preeminence in the multitude of these people that is the indication of a great city. In other words, the preeminence in the multitude of these people. In other words, the quality of the people, the preeminence, their excellence, right, of the multitude, in the multitude of these people. That is the indication of in other words, the quality of the citizens, the quality of the multitude. One that can send out a large number of workers, but few heavily armed troops cannot possibly be great. In other words, you need to have troops. Right? This is a practical thing, right? You can send out all these workers, but they're not capable of sending out hoplites to defend the city. Not going to be great. To be a great city and a populous one is not the same thing. In other words, a great city is one is able to accomplish things, do things. And it's not, for a big city, a very large city with lots of people, is not necessarily going to be a great city. Okay. Again, the great city is what it does, how it rules, how it behaves. This too, at any rate, is evident from the facts that it is difficult, perhaps impossible, for a city that is too populous to be well managed. In other words, there's a problem. If it's too big, again, this is a big thing that you can have a city. If the city is so big, a population is so huge, and it's so thin, that it extends beyond its. It's not. Um, 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 This idea that the size, appropriate size, a polis should have appropriate size. There's an appropriateness of it. And if it's too much, too big, too many people, two things, it might not be able to be well managed. Because why? They're too different. They're too much chaos. There's not harmony. There's not. It's just too large. It's too heterogeneous. There's not enough. There's too different. People are too different. They don't see each other as. They don't share enough in common. There's not enough in common that holds them together. They're all acting against each other, right? And the city tears itself apart, right? This is why that take the problem of you couldn't just take a place like Babylon. Babylon was just too big. You could put a wall around something of the Babylon, but it doesn't make it a city. Right? Again, that's what he said in Book 3, right? This discussion of what is truly a political community. What truly is it is a must have a there's a limit, the size. It's not limitless. This is why the nation cannot be a city in a sense. This is why the ethnoi or a nation cannot be political in a sense. Of those that are held to be beautifully governed, finely governed, at any rate, we see none that is lax in regard to the restriction and number of inhabitants. In other words, all beautiful governments are concerned size. But this is something that the modern world doesn't really do. In other words, this is the change of the modern politics and ancient politics. Ancient politics concerned itself with size, concerned itself with if it grew too big, it'd have to break off. Because the polis had a limit; it couldn't grow too big or fall apart. So therefore, you needed to concern yourself with this, and therefore, a beautifully governed city would concern itself with size. The modern world, we don't do this. We don't. The modern state and the modern society seems to be as a product of willing agency and consent of the willing agency, right, is one that we're willing that as long as there's a common will and there's a general will, collective will that we will it to be, then it can be as big as it can be. Okay, so therefore, this is the difference. There's in the ancient world, in the ancient polis, the ancient political form, there was limits. The modern political form is limitless, right? And that's the difference in a sense. This is clear also through the proof alleged afforded by by arguments. In other words, for law is a certain sort of order, and good governments must necessarily involve a good order. Right. This is 19. Let's look at 19 says. The term good governance, eunomia, is etymologically related to law, nomos, right? Eunomia, nomia, no, but suggestive of the condition of orderliness going beyond observance of legal norms. So, good governments and laws are connected, but it's not just merely obeying the law. It means what? It means that there's a suggestion of an orderliness going beyond mere observing, doing it well, doing it beautifully. But an overly excessive number is incapable of partaking in order. Too big, too out of control, too no. This is order is important. Order, harmony. This is the order and harmony. That's the connection. This is indeed a task requiring a divine power, which is what holds together the whole itself. In other words, the composite whole of everything. How does it hold together? Now, there's this balance, the size. In other words, this idea of sharing stuff in common, and having all more in common that they share in common, right? That therefore there's an equality here. This equality is that they share in common a life together. Okay, this is the classical thing. The modern solves this by consent of the governed, consent of the willing agency that the parties will it to be. That therefore, as long as we consent to it and we will unto it, and we accept and submit our wills to the collective body politic, the body politic of the of this, and we there's it's limitless in that sense, right? This is the idea for the modern world, the modern political theory. Um, but so therefore, order. In other words, the modern view thinks that there's order that um, there can be order in large numbers. There can be a large number can have order. The Aristotelian classical world believes that no, that in other words, there are limits. There's a size limit. There's not infinite possibility here. That there's a certain size, things break down. It's too big. In other words, again, remember the koinonia. The koinonia is there are koinonia, human beings. In other words, human beings have humanity in common, but that is not strong enough that they can live well together. They need more in common so that they can live together and that live sharing a life together. Okay, that is the point here of this thing. This is what a koinonia is in this sense, a shared life together. In this degree, the city is that perfect or the koinonia that is sufficient in that it allows that they are able to live well, live beautifully, right? Um, um, this indeed a task requiring divine power, he says, which holds together hold. At times, at the same time, too small a number is also inadequate for a good and beautiful arrangement. Since the beautiful Cologne, right? At any rate, we are accustomed to perceive in things in substantial in number and size. So again, it can't be it's in other words, again, remember the purpose of the city is to be self-sufficient. I mean, what does it mean, self-sufficiency? It doesn't mean that it's able to take everything, it needs everything. It's able to, in other words, it's able to have enough that it's able to achieve a living well, a life together that is beyond mere life, but living beautifully, living well. What is that understood? It is understood as being able to be eudaimonia, which is happiness, right? This flourishing, this idea of flourishing, and being able to fulfill one's nature as a human being, our social and our capacities, right? Um, So therefore, there is the beautiful ideas. In other words, too small. If it's too small, too thing is not enough to be sufficient. It is not able to achieve that happiness and well-being. The polis is that mean state of between excess and defect, insufficiency and excess that allows a kind of moment. It is kind of Pareto optimality point that all of a sudden, if you have too much, then what you have is regret. You have what? You have a deviation. You have excess. It's that breaking down. It's that famous diminishing margin returns that you don't get. In other words, you don't get that peak utility of good, and then all of a sudden it starts falling apart. Okay, so again, like a Pareto optimality and a diminishing returns of excess. Okay, so let's continue. Hence, the city too must necessarily be beautiful where finest, most beautiful, where together with size, uh, the defining principle mentioned is present. In other words, the thing that defines living well. In other words, that it's not only size, but it's that the principle that defines the city. And what is it define? Living well, living beautiful. But there is a certain measure of the size of a city as well, just as in all other things, animals, plants, instruments. None of these things will have its own capacity if it is either overtly small or excessive in respect to size, right? Again, this is idea. But it will sometimes be wholly robbed of its nature, and in others, times in poor condition. So therefore, in other words, what is the fitting size? A body that is too big is not going to be a healthy body. A body too small is not going to be too healthy. Now you got to continue this, right? A ship that is a foot long, for example, will not be a ship at all, nor one 1,200 feet. In other words, at the time, in other words, it's successive, 12, and as an appropriate for a certain size, will make for a bad voyage. In the one case, because of smallness, in the other case, of success, right? What is the appropriate ship to do the voyage? You make a ship that's a kilometer long, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers long. Okay, what is the purpose of the ship voyage? What is it being done for? It's most ship journeys is not going to work for. What is again this? What is appropriate is timed to the task it's doing, and what is the task of the polis? It's living well. Okay, again from book 3. In other words, it's either bad because of one size of its smallness or because of it's too big, too large. Similarly with cities as well. The one that is made up of too few persons is not self-sufficient. Though the city is a self-sufficient, though the city is a self-sufficient thing, while the one that is made of too many person with respect to the necessary things, self-sufficient like a nation, but not of a city. Okay, so therefore it might be used like a nation. It's too large, but it's a nation, but it's not going to be the city. It doesn't have that same capacity. For it is not easy for a regime to be present. So therefore, nations, this large thing, a regime. What is a regime? The politeia. The politeia is the ordering that makes possible the polis. Okay, it makes possible the polis. The regime is makes sure it's authoritative. It binds it together. It explains the way of life. A nation is just too the koinonia is just too weak. In other words, it's something there. It's something that's common. It, you might not. It's not going to have a regime. It might have a ruler or a king or someone, a father figure, and relies on family and blood and things like that. But it's not going to have the kind of a complete way of life. It doesn't offer enough. It doesn't. The nation can't offer enough. The nation does not have a regime in this, a politeia in this sense. It is not a city. It is not easy for a regime to be. In other words, a nation can have a regime, but it's not going to fit well. It's not going to be political. It's going to a nation is either going to be masterly, or it's going to have a kind of more despotic ruler or paternalistic ruler, kingly or despotic. Okay, that's the problem of nations. Aristotle would argue that nations are not political. They can form political communities, but they're just too big, and that if you try to use the political form in it, it's going to be weak. It's not going to be as effective. And this is the difference between the ancients and the moderns. The moderns, the state is not only suitable for the state. In other words, the nation only becomes political in the modern world because of the state. The state makes the nation, the political capacity of the state as a political form possible. The state does, the modern state. The polis, the political community, the civitas of the ancient world, the political community, this koinonia, this political koinonia, is not. It is this. The polis is a kind of finite thing between excess, and that the nation is too big, is too large. This who will be general, who will be general of an overly excessive number, right? Who will be herald unless he has the voice of the stentor? This is the problem. In other words, who can be a herald if he has the voice of a stentor? That's a great voice. A proverbial centaur is Homo. The proverbial centaur was one of Homer's warriors, right? The voice of command, the voice of things. You have to be a general. You have to have a general. You have to have, if too many people. You can't have like one general for like a million people. You create divisions and armies, right? A leader is going to be, a general is going to have a certain size. You might have a big general over the other general, but then but just have, if he's not going to have those other generals, it's going to be very difficult to do it. Very difficult to be a good governor, thing like this. The same thing with centaur, the voice, to be able to hear my commands. Hence, the first city must necessarily be made up of a multitude hence the first city must necessarily be made up of a multitude so large as to be the first multitude that is self-sufficient, with a view of living well in the context of the political community. So therefore, this idea that the city is what is that first multitude is so large as to be the multitude that is self-sufficient, with a view of living well in context of a political community. That it is possible for one that exceeds this on the basis of number to be a greater city, but it's not possible, as we have said, indefinitely. So you might have a bigger city, you have more than the first city, the initial city. You need a base. In other words, you have to hit. In other words, you need a certain size in order to get self sufficiency, And you can get a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more, but it's not infinite. There is, as we said, indefinitely. It is not possible, as we said, indefinitely. There's a certain limit, and once you get to a too big of a size, then it starts falling apart. Again, the mean, like, a diminishing margin of return here is like is at that stance. As to what defining principle what the defining principle of the excess is, it is easy to see from the facts, right? So in other words, okay, what is he saying? What is the defining principle of this, right? What is it? The actions of the city belong on the one hand to the rulers, and on the other to the ruled, right? So that the action the city engages in is not only on the one hand the rulers, but also the ruled, right? The task of the ruler is to command and make and judgment, right? Is commanding and exercising judgment, right? With a view both to judgment concerning the just things and the distribution of offices on the basis of merit, the citizens must necessarily be familiar with one another's qualities. You have to be able to see each other. You have to know each other's qualities. You have to know them. You have to know them, who they are. If you're going to make this decisions about what is best, they have to know who they are and what they're doing. Where this does not happen to come about, but where this does not happen to come about, they don't know each other, they don't know who they are, they don't know the qualities. What is connected with the offices and with judging is necessary carried on poorly. So, in order to make judgments, in order to make the things, you must know the quality, the nature, the character, and the quality of those who you're ruling or sharing and rule with, right? If you don't know that, then you're going to act. You're going to expiate your offices and judging are going to be done badly. Okay, for in either case, it is not just to act haphazardly, right? There's not you can't. It's not just to act haphazardly. You have to do it deliberatively. You have to do it through decision and choice and knowing. The very thing that manifestly happens in an overly populous city, things this happen chaos. This is a danger of overly populous city. Is gonna Things are gonna happen haphazardly. You're not going to be able to know everyone. It's too much. You can't know people. You can't know who they are. That the rulers and the sitting people will not know everyone. This is why the founding fathers did not want representation of deliberative bodies, the assemblies of the nation, even to be one above one for one representative of 30,000 to 40,000, right? This idea is that, like, today that we have representation almost one per half million, one per half million is would be, oh my God, horrifying. This is why in fact, this is why our democracy in America is so today less democratic and less responsive, representative of the people. It's more kind of an elite. But the congressmen of today are more elites. Therefore they had the status of what senators were, whereas the founders wanted to say we picked the best. We want to pick the better person to be a representative. Federalist paper argues, but the founders wanted to have it to be representative. That they, in other words, they know that everyone in the community would know who they are. At least one or two. In other words, what is it? Everyone knows. What do we say? This idea. Everyone knows about. This is why there's this wonderful thing about autopus. We have to be able to see the city as far as one can see it. This is going to be talked about later. My friend Jansen wrote a paper about this in Review of Politics. About the city of being able to view, being able to take one glance, right? Which he'll talk about that. But well, this is the problem here. The city is to know people. You have to know them, right? So remember this. Most people at best know about 100 and 150 people at best. You can know. That's why the size of a company, a military company where the commander knows everyone is the company, but 120 people, 120, 150 people. That is the general limit of what person can know. It's good friends, of really good friends, of people that you know their complete title. But if you have 2 degrees of separation, so quality of this, 120, each one knowing 120, Well, that's 1 degree of separation. That's pretty large. That's a square of 120. Okay. Third degree of separation is a cubed, right? So it's we have this idea of the closer that the degree of separation, the more close it is. So 30,000 would be, I think it would be, um, yeah. So therefore, what is it? It's 1 degree of separation. 1 degree, let's say, of 1 degree is about 14 cubed of 120. So it's what 14,000, and twice that is around 30. That's about 30,000. Not cubed, but you know, 120 times 120. 120 times 120 is 120 times 120 times another 120. The cubed. This is over a million. 1 point. This is huge. So therefore, the reasonable things is like 1 degree of separation, right? This is double. That is what the view of this would be, that this is the normal size. Today, we are 3 degrees of separation. That therefore, we maybe not necessarily we don't know who our leaders are, who our political people are deciding, and they don't necessarily know us. And because of that, what happens is that you can get a situation where they, as they say, we rely on media. We rely on media to tell people are, but the media doesn't really tell us who they are. That gives us the appearances of things. And because people don't know really who people are, they don't know their character. They have a problem here. They really don't know the character of those who are governing them. So therefore, you don't you in that you'd know one person that would know the guy. You have at least one neighbor, one person that would know you. One of the people you'd know would know who that is, most likely. 120 like this is simply going to be this way. A friend of a friend would do this. 3 degrees of separation. If you didn't know it, then they would know someone who'd know it. Okay, so therefore, this is why this idea here of degrees of separation, right? How many degrees of separation between this person and that person? And therefore, this is the idea. Now, the danger is if you have high degrees, and we have such a big population that they don't know each other, then it's going to be very difficult for them to, do things finally, do things administratively. Things will be haphazardly, right? Further, in such cities, it is easy for aliens and foreigners to assume the part of the regime. This is why these big cities, like this big, that all of a sudden that foreigners and aliens can come in and play roles. It is not difficult for them to escape notice on account of the excessive numbers. Right? Too many people, too big things. No one knows who they are. All of a sudden, they start exercising. They assume a role in the regime. Right. It is clear, therefore, that the best defining principle for a city is this: the greatest excess of number with a view to the self-sufficiency of life that is readily severable. In other words, you can see it, you can observe it. In other words, this is just 22. The synoptus, uh, well seeing. In other words, seeing that the take easy to take in at a glance. This is that line. This is my friend David Jansen wrote a piece on this. Easy to take in at a glance. That uh, that this is that life. In other words, a city that has to be taken in at a glance. This idea that we all know each other. We can see it. We can see it and do it. That this is the self-sufficiency, the size of number that they can still see it. That you can, if it gets too big, you can't see it, or are able to know people in it. Then what happens? It gets this mismanaged. It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't become beautiful. It becomes. It starts being problematic. It starts falling apart. This is concerning the size of the city. Let the discussion stand in this manner. So we got to stop. The size of the city right here, and the size of the people. This is this idea of I'm going to get this line again. Eu synoptos. That is easy to take in at a glance. That's what the expression is. That's why surveyable, right? So let's stop here. We're going to stop here. We will, um, if you have any comments or questions about this chapter, please put it. Questions, concerns, or issues, or things you want to ask about this, please put them right. If I see them, I will answer them. If you liked it, like it. Please like it. Um, and if you liked it, you share it with a friend. Share it on social media. Get other people to come join us. Another thing you can do is if you're not subscribed, subscribe, or encourage your friends and people to subscribe, like to grow the channel some more. This is always these things we do. If you didn't like it, you can say, "Oh no, I didn't like it." Or you didn't like, think I did something wrong, or didn't cover something good enough for the theme. Well, say something on the comments, and it'll help me. That's feedback. Um, as again, if you subscribed and like this is wonderful. If you want to help, if you want to help in some way, if you want to help me continue doing these things, and helps, a little bit of moolah moolah, you can be a subscribe star on Patreon. Of course, there's not many people doing it. I understand that, because I'm not doing much. I'm late in the show, and I only have under like 250 people. I don't have a big number of people. I should have more people. People say, "Oh, this is good." I just came into this very late, and I'm not getting any of the attention that I probably should get. Those particularly as people who are interested in these things. Another thing, if you want to help, if you don't want to subscribe, start, you can just buy a book. Buy my book. Buy a notebook for Aristotle's Politics. It's published by Lulu. It is it's a study guide. It's a workbook. It's not a commentary as my other books are. This is basically a kind of cliff notes, which kind of gives book by book, chapter by chapter, kind of a summary, with a little bit of summary explanation, thematic questions to kind of do things, outlines, breaking down of the key points, charts, graphs to help you understand the text in various ways, but get a stronger grasp of things. And it would be useful for students studying the politics, or people who are trying to get a grasp of this text, try to guide their way through the text. I hope you buy a copy. Now, you buy by Lulu. It's available by Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all those online distributors. I'll get something if you buy something. So I'm not complaining about that. What I'm saying is you want to make sure. But if you buy it from Lulu, I get what the publishers, what those guys get. Okay, I'll get their share. Okay, so the only difference is Lulu charges you shipping, and therefore, okay, people do this. Okay, whatever. Just please do this. Get a copy. Get it for a friend, a student, who's doing something, studying politics. The politics will be useful. On that, tomorrow, the next time we meet, we will look at chapter 5, where we look at continue here. And on that, have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.